Welcome, everyone, to the February 7th, 2025, 6 More Weeks of Winter episode of On Iowa Politics. This week on the show, the pesticide tort reform bill is back at the Iowa legislature. House Republicans' Higher Education Committee is in full swing. And ladies and gentlemen, perhaps for the very last time on the podcast anyways, we talk Cedar Rapids Casino. And first of all, is it 6 more weeks of winter? Did I remember that number right? With the Groundhog's Day, it's 6 weeks, right? That is so reassuring that I just got everybody. All right,
it's 6 weeks either way. So
okay. I wasn't 100% confident in my number, so I appreciate the backup. All right. Hey everyone, I'm Erin Murphy, the Des Moines bureau chief for the Gazette in Cedar Rapids. With me this week is Gazette deputy bureau chief Tom Barton, who's coming in hot without any video. What's going on, Tom?
I have no idea.
Hey Tom, how's it going?
Hey, having some technical difficulties here at the State House. Hopefully we'll get that figured out. Sorry, Bailey. Sorry to our producer.
It's been a month this week at the State House, so understood, Tom. Lead Des Moines bureau chief Maya Marchel is with us. Hello, Maya.
Hey, Erin. I feel like the beginning of this podcast is a summarization of how this week has been at the legislature.
Yeah, it was one of those weeks, without a doubt. Sarah and Jared couldn't be with us. They are on the road this week to the Iowa Newspapers Association convention, just a few blocks to my left here as you look at me on your YouTube screen. But we do have Gazette columnist Todd Dorman with us. Hello, Todd.
Hello.
All right, let's get right to it this week. No sense burying the lead. The Iowa Racing and Gaming Commission today, again, we're recording Thursday afternoon, earlier this morning, issued its ruling on a request to build a new casino in Cedar Rapids. Our very own Tom Barton covered the meeting just this morning, and he's here now to tell us. And also, I want to say this out the top, there's some also interesting backstory to how we even got to this point on Thursday, some interesting legislative backstory. But again, in the interest of not bearing the lead, let's circle back to that later and start with the big ruling. Tom, yes or no, will there be a casino in Cedar Rapids?
Maybe.
It's a yes or no question, Tom.
No, sorry. How's that for an answer? So we had a surprise decision this morning from the Iowa Racing and Gaming Commission. As you mentioned, they voted 4-1 to grant a gaming license to build a planned $275 million casino and entertainment center near downtown Cedar Rapids. A groundbreaking is scheduled already for tomorrow morning back in Cedar Rapids. Here's why I had the caveat and said maybe. A lawsuit is likely. So reporters spoke to an attorney for Riverside Casino and Golf Resort who said that they intend to file a lawsuit. I think he said they hope to have that filed today. I don't know if, as of this recording, I hadn't seen it yet, but they plan on arguing before a Iowa District Court that the Racing and Gaming Commission this morning lacks the legal authority to be able to issue the license, arguing that the wording of a 2021 voter referendum in Linn County that authorized gaming in the county was invalid, that the wording in the language talked about granting approval to continue gaming in the county. However, gambling never was established or allowed in Linn County. And so the argument there is that, the 2021 referendum simply asked voters the wrong question to support issuance of a gaming license. And then as a result, the commission did not, under Iowa code, have the authority to provide the license that it granted this morning. I was told that they're also likely going to argue in district court that the quote unquote cannibalization, the drain of revenue on surrounding Iowa casinos is inconsistent with Iowa law. And so they're going to be asking the courts to resolve the legal status of the project and ask that the IRGC pause all development activities in Cedar Rapids.
Yeah, so it's fascinating because it sounds like the backers are going full speed ahead, like you said. The literal groundbreaking ceremony scheduled for the next Friday morning, depending on when you're listening to this. And meantime, the opponents planning a legal challenge. Boy, legislators wanted a moratorium. They didn't want the IRGC to do the job. Those folks want the courts to overrule. Nobody wants the IRGC to do its job in this thing, I guess, except for the people who got their way, right?
Right, except for Cedar Rapids officials and the casino developer and
right.
Lynn County businesses and nonprofits and the unions who say that they would benefit from the construction jobs that would be created by building this $275 million facility. But I mean, it definitely was surprising, I think, to a lot of people. So, you mentioned kind of the interesting backstory to this. This is a more than decade-long effort by Cedar Rapids officials to try and get a casino in Lynn County. The Iowa Racing and Gaming Commission had twice rejected proposals in 2014 and 2017 to bring a casino to Cedar Rapids. At the time, commissioners cited concerns that a new facility would siphon off existing customers and revenue essentially from current casino properties in eastern Iowa. And a lot of observers, yours truly, thought that not a whole lot had changed in that the commission would still be reticent to grant a license for those reasons, mainly because two market studies that were ordered by the commission, said or showed that a proposed Cedar Rapids casino would largely rely on pulling patrons and revenue from other Iowa casinos, but would add approximately $60 million in net new gaming revenue to Iowa annually. And commissioners, really seized on that. Despite concerns about market saturation and, this quote unquote cannibalization, they cited the project's economic benefits, including job growth and new tax and gaming revenue, in addition to community support. Commissioner Julie Andres, a Republican from Okoboji, said that she felt that the proposed Cedar Rapids casino provided a unique and different project in the market, and again talked about net gain of revenue to the state. IRGC Commissioner Amy Burkhart, independent from Burlington, echoed those comments, saying that quote, "All I see is net gain. I see net gain in terms of tax revenues to the state." Again, noting that state gaming revenues would otherwise decline due to competition in surrounding states. Commissioner Mark Campbell, a Democrat from Otho, said, some questioned whether awarding a Cedar Rapids license would, quote, "open up Pandora's box for gaming in Iowa." Commissioner Campbell said that he felt assured by the data presented to the commission that Iowa's gambling market has the capacity to support the project and that temporary shifts in market share were to be expected. And, said that, every gaming license issued in Iowa has experienced some degree of cannibalization or market share redistribution. And then he went on to say, but yet the industry continues to thrive, and says that, the reality is that, many casinos that were granted licenses in Iowa, were aware when they applied, fully understanding that temporary shifts might occur, and that despite these shifts, he feels that Iowa gaming has remained robust and successful.
Yeah, and the other part of the backstory, Tom, real quick, and then I want to get Todd's thoughts here too. But we mentioned the moratorium that legislators were considering. That kind of unfolded interestingly earlier this week too, where The bill was moving in the Senate, and it was towards the end of the legislative workday, and it was going to be up for a committee, possibly up for committee consideration. And yourself and other State House reporters were headed that to committee, waiting to see what was going to happen. And right as things were going to get started, they dropped the big news, right?
That's right. State Senator Ken Rosenboom, Republican from Oskaloosa, who is chair of the state government committee, announced that he was not going to bring the House-passed moratorium bill forward to the committee, and that they would not move it this legislative session. He said essentially that there just wasn't the votes, that they just did not have the support from Senate Republicans to get that bill all the way through the legislative process, and felt that there were, more important, more pressing issues that, lawmakers in the Senate needed to move on and spend their time on, didn't feel that it was prudent or necessary to continue to spend time talking about a casino moratorium bill, saying that it has, essentially sucked a lot of air out of the room so far, this legislative session, these past couple of weeks.
Yeah, and that was just kind of interesting for us watching all this process, because obviously if that bill would have eventually passed the Senate and been signed by the governor, that would have taken the ball out of the IRGC's hands altogether. So we're wondering whether this is going to happen then, and we weren't expecting much interesting that day. I think that was Tuesday, right, Tom? And then all of a sudden that bill's killed, and that was a big thing, big news all of a sudden at the late end of the late day, and that put the ball in IRGC's court.
Well, and another question that was hanging out there is the bill is retroactive.
Yeah, that's true. Good point.
So it would have, it was a 5-year moratorium, saying that the Racing and Gaming Commission couldn't grant any new casino licenses from January 1st of this year through June 30 of 2030. So you still had this question of, well, okay, could lawmakers still pass this bill after the IRGC makes a determination, potentially grant a license, and then could they pass this bill and essentially, void that decision? So there was still that question hanging out there. But again, Senator Rosenboom seemed pretty clear that, they don't want to go down that path, that there doesn't seem to be, at least at the moment, support for that.
Yeah, and to just put a final pin on that, again, as we sit here and record Thursday afternoon, I thought it was important today to ask Senator Rosenboom that question after because he said all that before the IRGC ruling. Not that I don't believe him, but now the landscape has changed. I thought it would be important to hear from Senator Rosenboom whether the IRGC's ruling changes that calculus at all. And we have not, again, as of 3:30 this afternoon on Thursday, heard back one way or the other on that. Watch our future reporting. We'll eventually get that. But it would be interesting. I mean, as Democratic Senator Janice Weiner said today, you never say never in this building, as we all know, until sine die. So that's an open question that I think will be interesting to hear at some point from Senate Republicans. So maybe we haven't talked about casinos for the last time just quite yet on the podcast, and we got the lawsuit too. I got too ahead of my skis there. Todd, you've been watching this all unfold. I'm curious to get your reaction. And first of all, were you surprised by the IRGC ruling?
Well, I was surprised because it was a pretty fundamental change, I guess, in how the commission usually handles this stuff. They didn't mention cannibalization a lot. I liked the market. It was the market shift is what they call it. So Riverside can just watch its money gently shift up the highway to Cedar Rapids.
It's not being canalized anymore. It's just being shifted.
So I think it was surprising. I thought there was a chance it might be 3-2. I was surprised it was 4-1 for her. But, for the people that have been backing this and trying to get a license for the better part of for 12 plus years, I mean, this was it. If it didn't happen this time, there was never going to be a casino in Cedar Rapids. I'm sure there are people in Cedar Rapids that would be fine with that, but this was it. If they failed, we never would have to go through this tedious process ever again. So it's a big win, but we've got this lawsuit, and I think of it sort of as, if you don't know anything about Star Wars, it's going to be lost on you, but the decision seems like the Death Star, and this lawsuit seems like the 2-meter exhaust port that Luke Skywalker shot into and blew the whole damn thing up. So I think
fantastic analogy, Todd.
I think it looks good. I mean, they're going to do their groundbreaking. I tend to think they can maybe survive a court challenge, but Alan Ostergen said that he thinks the court challenge has merit, and he's made a living with cases like this, arguing over the letter of the law and these intricate technical details, and he's won lawsuits arguing that stuff. So maybe
Iowa libertarians are nodding knowingly right now.
Yeah, right. So he thinks it's got legs, and so he's the only lawyer on the panel. So I tend to maybe look to him for some. I think what he says has some merit, but for now, it's for a while anyway, it's gonna be happy days in Cedar Rapids, and everybody can turn a shovel and pat each other's backs and hug and all that stuff, and then the district court kind of looms. I wonder if they'll be. I'm sure that they'll be asking for an injunction to block the issuance of the license.
I would
think that would be pretty typical. But yeah, so I don't know if that means that if it happens tomorrow, they have to put the dirt back that they've shoveled. I don't think so, but we'll have to figure that out.
And we can have our reporter ask that at the press at the event tomorrow morning. Are you storing this dirt in a safe space in case you have to return it?
I guess the city owns the dirt, or the Peninsula Pacific owns an option on the dirt, so they can work it out.
Oh goodness! All right. Well, I mean, regardless, big news today, and as Tom and Todd alluded to, a little bit surprising. Every conversation I'd had with people about it, I said, I'm got to believe that it'll be rejected. I just didn't know what had changed in the information regarding making this decision. I think, Todd, you nailed it. Something that I hadn't thought of. The information didn't change. The IRGC changed. This isn't the same IRGC that's voted on previous permits, and this group took a different view of it than previous ones had. Yeah. That's why you get paid the big bucks to be on this show, Todd. The insights just like that.
Wow. I'll look for the check.
That's right. If you haven't gotten it yet, we'll circle back after this.
It's in the mail, I suppose.
Listen to your doorbell. It might be coming this afternoon. All right. Elsewhere under the Golden Dome this week, we saw the return of the pesticides bill. Iowa Senate Republicans renewed their legislative effort to pass legislation that would add a layer of legal protections for pesticide manufacturers who adhere to certain federal label regulations. So that's the ultra baseline. Maya, beyond that, give us a little summary of the bill without putting us to sleep with legalese. That's the challenge facing you there. And why it's been so contentious. I know you're new to this one, obviously, but you covered a subcommittee and you heard all about the strong feelings on both sides of this thing.
Yeah, as you just laid out, this is a bill that was last year. It just didn't come to fruition, but A lot of people feel very passionately about this on both sides. You could see that in the very packed committee room. For some reason, they put one of the most highly attended subcommittee hearings in the smallest room possible.
The literal, by the way, that's the literal smallest room possible in the Capitol for these.
Yeah, everyone was elbow to elbow. But yeah, as you kind of said, agriculture chemical companies would be protected from lawsuits over warning labeling on their products to inform consumers of health risks of the product under this bill. So one of the big proponents of this bill, and kind of the company that's overseeing bills similar to this one across the country, is Bayer. The company owns the glyphosate-based herbicide Roundup, which is produced primarily in Muscatine. Farmers use it across the state to kill weeds, and they're heavily supporting this bill. So with this, the reason why they're supporting it is because they have faced hundreds of thousands of lawsuits from different individuals claiming that the company has failed to warn them about the health risks of this product, most commonly non-Hodgkin's lymphoma type of cancer. And these lawsuits have cost Bayer billions in litigation costs. The argument from individuals suing them is that these are types of lawsuits, their failure to warn. So they're arguing that Bayer failed to warn them that they would cause these health risks, like most commonly cancer, different forms of cancer. And so that's why they're bringing these suits. And I mean, again, like these lawsuits have cost Bayer billions in litigation costs. So they're looking for a lot of different ways to curb this. These lawsuits aren't just happening in Iowa, although there's a lot of them because Iowa is a big agriculture state, but they're happening across the country, across the world. So Bayer purchased Monsanto, the company that created Roundup, in 2018. And like I said, Roundup is primarily produced in Muscatine. Bayer has multiple crop science plants across Iowa. So they're pretty predominant in the state. And so basically this would shield Bayer from these lawsuits claiming that the company failed to warn these consumers of health risks of the product labels, because they are arguing that they align with federal labeling requirements. The Environmental Protection Agency has cleared glyphosate to not have to have a warning, a cancer warning or a health warning to be placed on these products. So they're arguing that they are in line with federal regulations. They're already doing that, so they shouldn't be faced with these types of lawsuits. And although the EPA has said that, a federal district court requested that the agency review that decision back in 2022. We still haven't seen that review yet, and who knows if we will with the new administration. And again, even though the EPA has cleared glyphosate of not being a carcinogen, the International Agency for Research on Cancer determined that it is probably carcinogenic to humans. So it's really interesting to watch kind of which research people are pointing to, whether it can be definitively said whether or not Roundup or glyphosate is actually causing cancer. But yeah, this room was packed with agriculture lobbyists, farmers, and healthcare professionals. Brad Epperly, the person representing Bayer, argued that the bill wouldn't bar individuals who have health risks or potential health risks from these products from bringing lawsuits. Like, they could still bring causes of action like negligence, effective product design, express warranties, implied warranties, fraud, misrepresentation, all these things. He said that manufacturers are caught in kind of a catch-22 of either, okay, they have to follow the federal law and open themselves up to potential state-level legal actions for failing to warn consumers or violate the label laws. So that's what these folks are saying. Richard Deming, the director of Mercy One Cancer Center in Des Moines, said while there are multiple causes of cancer, including cigarettes, food, alcohol, different things, right? He said pesticides are contributing to the state's climbing rates of the disease. And he pointed to a study that showed pesticides are as nearly as carcinogenic as cigarettes and can cause various forms of cancer. That was pretty interesting. And just as a side note, Iowa has the fastest growing rate of new cancers in the country and the second highest rate in cancer. The second highest in cancer rates compared to other states, according to the Iowa Cancer Registry. So again, I mean, cancer is a highly focused on issue everywhere, but especially in this state, because it's a thing that people are actively trying to address just because of these rising rates. And, you know, if farmers showed up both supporting and opposing the bill, one farmer said that being able to limit these lawsuits would help farmers maintain their access to this this chemical, this product, and it's really needed right now because he said farmers are operating on razor thin margins. It's a tight year. It's hard to be a farmer right now. Other farmers came forward and said that their families have multi-generational farming families. And so they have noticed that some of their children have been born with defects that can be traced back to certain chemicals used in agricultural chemicals. Their family members have developed certain forms of cancer, even though cancer doesn't run in their family. You can just see why it's so contentious. But yeah. That's a pretty broad rundown.
No, and that's great, and you covered it all. That was perfect. And it's just interesting because a lot of that is an angle that's being covered in other states, like you said, and is very similar. But there's also, it's kind of fascinating that here in Iowa we have a few unique extra layers to it. With one, the cancer rates that you just talked about, and then two, the fact that the product is actually manufactured here in the state too. So it is a fascinating debate. They passed it out of the Senate last year. The House didn't take it up, so I assume that the Senate will pass it again this year out of the chamber. No reason to believe they couldn't, and we'll see what the House thinks of it again. Or does that become a end of session negotiating bill too? I guess it depends on how badly Senate Republicans decide they want that one. They've done some other tort reform bills in the recent past with the commercial trucking, and medical malpractice caps too. So this would be kind of the third one of those. So we'll see if that happens or not. Maya, real quick, while I got you too, this wasn't the biggest story by any stretch of imagination, but it was just kind of interesting. And for those folks who aren't up at the Capitol every day, like we are, there's a little bit of excitement one day this week, and the scheduling gods are either hilarious or sadistic. I'm not sure which, but we had demonstrations planned on the same day at the Capitol by Moms for Liberty, which, if you're not familiar with, is a very conservative group, and another organization. I can't remember if they had a name, the other group, but generally speaking, it was an anti-Donald Trump group that was, protesting President Donald Trump and his policies. Those two groups were protesting, rallying, whatever the word is, at the Iowa Capitol on the same day. So that's a heck of a mix. So maybe what comes next shouldn't be terribly surprising. Got a little tense-ish at one point, right, Maya?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, it was already a super chaotic day. So like you said, this couldn't have been planned. So one of the groups involved, they weren't necessarily like a specific organization or a group. They're just a bunch of different demonstrators that gathered for this national day, a national movement to protest the first initial weeks of the second Trump administration, all the executive orders, their claim of that Project 2025 is intertwined in all of these decisions. The movement was organized online, I think primarily over Reddit, using social media and stuff like that. It was either 50-51 or 50-501. So 50 states, 50 protests one day. So they were basically just protesting the actions of the Trump administration so far, whether it was their actions towards USAID and cutting that, stuff with immigration crackdowns, the richest man on earth, Elon Musk, and his involvement in the administration, just very broad-ranging. So they were outside protesting in front of the Capitol. And then Moms for Liberty, they're, if you're not familiar, different groups can meet in the rotunda space of the Capitol every day for different reasons. But Moms for Liberty was there that day. They were kind of visiting the legislature, lobbying that day. So they were having their presentation on the floor. And so after the demonstration was done outside, a lot of folks came inside to go to subcommittee meetings, to talk to their legislators, warm up. And there was kind of a tizzy between the two groups, as you would imagine. And 4 people ended up being detained from the demonstrators that were previously outside. And I believe that 3 people actually were charged, but Iowa state troopers were kind of lined up and slowly kind of guiding them towards the door. They're yelling, they were making noise. And so, yeah, it was an added layer to a very busy day. So, but yeah, just a really, really odd intersection of scheduling. It just lined up that way. So
yeah. Yep. And that's the Iowa State Patrol that's there at the Capitol every day anyways, providing security. And those were the officers that detained and as Maya said, we learned today, I believe, the date that the 3 were charged, all with interference with official acts, right, Maya? Did I remember that right? Yeah. All right. Lastly, this week, still under the Golden Dome, wanted to talk about the new Higher Education Committee formed by Iowa House Republicans. We haven't talked a whole lot about it on the podcast because, frankly, sometimes I forget about it when we're developing the podcast topics each week, because we have an outstanding higher education reporter back at the Gazette, Vanessa Miller, who takes a lot of that coverage off of the Bureau's plate so we can focus on other things. The double-edged sword there is, like I just said, sometimes I forget about that stuff, and obviously it's very important. So let's talk about it this week. Todd, you clearly haven't forgotten about it like I have, because you wrote about one of the committee's bills this week, the one that would create a school of intellectual freedom at the University of Iowa. In fact, we did a little bit talk about that one last week, but just because it was the one that was the subcommittee where former Governor Terry Branstad started debating other members of the public and lobbying accusations of socialism at U of I professors. So that aside, Todd, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on the School of Intellectual Freedom bill and just kind of more broadly the work that committee has been, the bills it's been pumping out so far.
Well, the Republicans who run the legislature and the governor are sort of following, a roadmap that's been established in several other states. Florida would maybe be the most notable, where government has taken action to sort of try to either push liberals out of campus positions or to, have a chilling effect where they're afraid to state their, political views. And I mean, the School of Intellectual Freedom sounds, who could be against it? But it pretty much represents trying to get a conservative foothold at the University of Iowa and then kind of go from there. I assume that they'll be increasing its influence, and it's going to be independently operated and funded. So it's kind of like a little conservative think tank there on the kind of down from the old Capitol, maybe something like that. But a lot of this is being wrapped up in a lot of high-minded, democracy, and we've got to stop indoctrination and the founders. And I think Steve Holt was talking about the Reagan quote, where we're only one generation away from the end of democracy. And somewhere Donald Trump said, hold my shamrock shake, because we're in it now, baby. Because that's sort of he eats at McDonald's, which is why I said shamrock shake.
Yeah, I picked that up. Thanks, Todd.
So it's what's going on in a lot of places. And their argument is that these professors, socialist, liberal, what have you, are teaching college kids to hate America. And, their basis for that is, it's a lot of anecdotal stuff. And I mean, who doesn't know that there's a lot of liberals at the University of Iowa or on the other Regents campuses. That's who tends to go into an academic career, are people that are fairly liberal. But they're making the push, and there really doesn't seem to be any significant force standing up to try to stop them or argue against this stuff. I mean, you're going to have a smattering of Democrats when this is on the floor, these bills, but they're basically in a position to do what they want. And, so that's what they're going to do. They're going to try to conservatize those liberal universities. I think they're even against tweed jackets. They don't even like the tweed jackets. So it's a total wipeout.
Is this more or less what you expected, Todd, when you heard that this committee was being formed?
Yeah, you knew that this is exactly what it was for, is to strike out at campus liberalism and replace it with good old-fashioned compelled patriotism, which we all know makes people very patriotic.
I will say it'll be interesting. They're very closely guarded whenever they get asked about it on the other side of the rotunda. It will be interesting to see when those bills start heading over to the Senate, what Senate Republicans think of some of these proposals. For those who don't eat, sleep, and drink this like we all do here on the podcast, it would be mildly dangerous to assume that just because Republicans are also in control of the Senate, that they're going to love everything that House Republicans throw across the rotunda at them. We've seen plenty of examples, and it seems to be increasing in recent years, that as much as the big stuff that they get done, there's also plenty of times that the two caucuses don't see eye to eye. Now, I have no idea. They may very well be in lockstep on this.
I mean, I think it's telling, though, that the Senate did not form a special upper higher education committee. They didn't follow the House's suit. So that may be at least one small, clue that they may not be 100% on board with everything.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. That's second funnel stuff, but so we'll have to wait. But that'll be interesting. Shameless plug here while we're on the topic, and before we sign off. This weekend on Iowa Press, the guests are Taylor Collins, the Republican from the House who chairs that higher education committee and thus shepherds a lot of those bills. He's on with Ross Wilburn, the Democrat, the ranking Democrat on the committee. So we're obviously going to have a 26-minute discussion about those bills and the work they've been doing in that committee, and that should be a really interesting one. So if you find that topic at all interesting, make sure you check out Iowa Press on Iowa PBS this weekend. You may see a familiar face if you do. Real quick before we go, and Todd, forgive me for leaving you out on this one. This is pretty much for Tom and Maya. 1 to 10, how well are your brains functioning at this point at the end of this week?
10 being what, 1 being what?
Yeah, 10 being optimum and 1 being drooling all over your shoes.
The shoes, Erin. they're soaked.
Maya, how are you doing? What's your operating capacity?
Not quite that bad. My shoes are not damp. I would say a 3, mostly because every time you asked me to make a decision on something, I wanted to go to a coin flip because I didn't have the energy to think. So
make a decision on your own. It was just it wasn't even other than Wednesday was intense, but it was just a weird week, and it's just one of those ones that kind of trained you. And man, we haven't even hit the first funnel yet, and we're already whining about it. God help us then. All right. That'll do it for this episode of On Iowa Politics. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. If you're not already, make sure you subscribe to us on your streaming service of choice or on YouTube, where you can also smash that like button. You can also find the podcast each week on your preferred Gazette or Lee newspaper website. And now that you've listened to the On Iowa Politics podcast, make sure you're also subscribed to the On Iowa Politics newsletter, where every morning in your inbox you'll receive all the latest politics and government coverage from our team. You can subscribe to that free newsletter at the Gazette's website, thegazette.com. Lastly, don't forget that the work of everyone that you heard here today can be found on the pages and websites of the Quad City Times, Muscatine Journal, Cedar Rapids Gazette, Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier, Mesa City Globe Gazette, Council Bluffs Daily Nonpareil, and the Sioux City Journal. For Tom Barton, Maya Marchel Hoff, Todd Dorman, our producer Bailey Cichon, and even for he wasn't here, but I know Jared McNett would appreciate it if I said go Chiefs. I'm Erin Murphy. Be well, everyone, and be good.